carried me back to old Virginia.
Autumn in Tidewater, Virginia is generally beautiful, as summer's radiation gradually gives way to winter's chill. Usually, winters aren't harsh in the region because warm ocean currents keep seaside locales milder than the interior. But though this is generally true, Virginia history has recorded a few punishing winters, such as 1607, 1608, and 1609, which are at the top of any such list. The Jamestown colonists might have wondered what ring of Dante's Inferno this place is, especially as deadly summer heat swiftly passed the deadly winter chill year after year. Add crippling drought, angry natives, and malnourished settlers to that hellish climatological dance, and you'd begin to get a glimpse of early Jamestown. But as 1608 drew to a close, one ray of sunlight began to shine brightly.
Rain, oh the rain, pain, oh my pain, tears and rain fall the same. Chains, oh my chains, days, these long days,
The ground was frozen and snow-covered by early winter 1608. Food was depleted, and the colonists expended most of their energy just by digging out snow and building fires to keep warm. They weren't sure what would kill them first, starvation, cold, or Indians. John Smith knew that he couldn't remedy the cold, but he thought that he could at least fix the food and native problem. Powhatan, for his part, had imposed a trade embargo on the English, partly because his people lacked adequate food, and partly because of the English arrogance during their last meeting together. The plan to starve the English into oblivion might have worked had any of the previous leaders been in charge, but this was John Smith's presidency. Smith set off for the Nansmans, who refused to trade, even though they had promised 400 bushels of corn to the Englishmen. The response was not what Smith wanted to hear, so he ordered his men to shoot their guns, which always frightened the Indians, and then set fire to the first house they saw. Such a show of force worked, sort of. The Nansmen submitted to Smith by offering to give half of what they had in store. Thus, Smith and his men left with 100 bushels of corn, not really enough to sustain a colony of more than 120 men for very long. Powhatan soon received word of Smith's heavy-handed action and offered a deal. If Smith would come to Werowocomoco, build a house, and bring a grindstone as well as swords, guns, copper, and beads, then Powhatan would load Smith's boat with corn. Smith recognized this as a dangerous game, but he had no choice. Jamestown needed food in order to survive the winter. On December 29th, Smith and 46 men set off toward Werowocomoco with the colony's pinnace and 2 barges, in hopes of receiving food. The men stopped over with the Werowocomoco near present-day Smithfield on their way southward. It was here that Smith began searching for the lost colonists by asking 2 guides to be sent along with Michael Sycamore, who was also to search for silk grass during the venture. Sycamore's exploration turned up nothing but information about the lost colonists all being dead. Smith, however, in the meantime, was given a stern warning. Don't trust Powhatan. No matter how nice he is to you, he wants to cut your throats. But Smith already knew this, and had to continue toward Werowocomoco. Along the way, winter storms hindered the journey greatly. The English had to seek shelter with the Kekotans for a week because of extreme wind, rain, frost, and snow that forced them ashore. After leaving the Kekotans and sailing up the York River, another winter storm delayed the trip for 4 more days. This time the men stayed with the Kiskiaks, who tensely watched their invaders. Eventually the English arrived at Werowocomoco on January 12th, 2 weeks after they had departed from Jamestown. The York River, which flowed by the capital, was frozen a half-mile from shore, which kept the Englishmen from disembarking from their ships. After trying to maneuver closer to land, the boats ran aground on what Smith termed oozy shoals. While stuck on these shoals, Smith's impatience over the longer-than-planned trip got the better of him, and he decided to wade ashore for the last few hundred yards. His foolishness provided an idiotic example for at least a dozen other men who followed Smith through the frigid mud. Stunningly, no one died from exposure, but one man did come close. Upon coming ashore, Powhatan Indians warmed the English back to life and fed them in their homes. That warmth, however, did not carry over to the next day when Powhatan gave audience to Smith. Powhatan denied sending any invitation and wanted to know when he and his men would be leaving. Smith didn't accept the claim and asked how the chief could be so forgetful, at which reply Powhatan laughed and at least offered to see what the English could have brought for trade. Not that a trade might occur, mind you. The Indians had no food to trade, so said the wily chief. Smith then set in for a war of words, after which Powhatan said that he only wanted the English swords. Nothing else apparently was as valuable as corn in his estimation. First, Smith informed Powhatan that the English have abided by trade rules and was prepared to offer men for the Indian service. Next, Smith challenged Powhatan's claim that he had no food to spare by offering a thinly veiled threat about using his men to take what he wanted. But before Smith went too far down that belligerent road, he reiterated the friendship that was established between the two peoples, though that friendship could be threatened by Powhatan's actions. Powhatan's reply came directly. He accused Smith of being dishonest. Smith didn't want food, but wanted to take Powhatan's land. He claimed he could see this by the English arriving armed. Why would friends come with guns? Smith's response: Your warriors come to Jamestown armed, so what's the difference if we come to Werowocomoco armed with our own weapons? This type of verbal jousting continued late into the night, with both men accusing the other of not being friendly. Then the discussion wandered into obeisance territory, as Powhatan pointed out that Smith did not treat him with the same respect that the other Englishmen had portrayed. Why don't you bow?
Your life is yours. It's worth fighting for. Freedom is the door.
It was at this point in the discussion that Smith ordered his men to break the York's ice and start coming ashore with a show of force. Smith, meanwhile, was promising to lay down his arms on the following day while the English approached. Powhatan's lookouts saw what was happening, informed their chief, and the discussion abruptly ended. Powhatan fled the scene. The initial warm reception was now bone-chillingly cold. Powhatan had apparently ordered his men to kill the invaders that evening. But Smith's quick thinking kept the English alive. As part of Powhatan's plan, his men offered to keep watch over English guns while the English loaded corn onto their ships. Smith saw through this supposed kindness and turned the guns on the natives. He ordered them to load corn onto his ships instead. Once the task was completed, the English would remain in the capital until the river's tide rose high enough to dislodge the runaground vessels. Oddly, the Indians warmly entertained the English as if there was no problem between them. Pocahontas was apparently on the scene because she warned Smith about Powhatan's desire to kill them all. After surviving dinner, the English quickly boarded their ships around midnight and began their trek away from Werowocomoco, at which point Powhatan once again returned to his capital. Smith soon realized that the provisions gained at Werowocomoco were not enough to sustain the colonists. That being the case, he had to make an unplanned and undesired detour to the Pamunkeys led by Powhatan's brother Opechancanough. Opechancanough, true to form, was combative. He didn't want to part with his scant provisions either. Seeing the situation that he was in, Smith didn't waste any time and cut to the chase. I need food, you have it. If we're friends as you say we are, then please, help. Opechancanough also didn't waste any time. He organized 600 of his warriors to surround the house in which he and the English were negotiating. He was going to kill Smith and his men, but one of Smith's men saw what was taking place and informed his captain. After a hastily discussed council of war, Smith told his charges, "Let us fight like men and not die like sheep." But follow my direction, and let us do it by conditions so as not to die, but still obtain food." Smith then turned upon his rival and challenged him to a duel. "I see your plot to murder me, but I fear it not," Smith said. "Let's strip down, go to the island in your river, and fight. The winner will be master over all our men. If this doesn't suit you, then go get all the men you can, and they will fight against our meager 15. Winner take all." Opechancanough knew that he was in a position of strength, so why listen to Smith? Instead, he wanted to kill off Smith then and there. He still feigned friendship by offering to give Smith a gift, just outside of the tent. Smith then came unglued. He grabbed Opechancanough by the hair, put a pistol into the Indian's chest, and forced the chief outside where all of the warriors could see what was going on. Then he warned the belligerent Pamunkeys. "I see you, Pamunkeys, the great desire you have to kill me, and my long suffering your injuries has emboldened you to this presumption. The cause I have forborne your insolence is the promise I made you before the God I serve to be your friend till you give me just cause to be your enemy. If I keep this vow, my God will keep me. You can't hurt me. If I break it, he will destroy me. But if you shoot but one arrow to shed one drop of blood of any of my men, or steal the least of these beads of copper I spurn here before you with my foot, you shall see I will not cease revenge." Smith's actions sent the Pamunkeys into confusion, but eventually the standoff worked. The Pamunkey warriors dropped their weapons and brought hundreds of baskets of corn to the English, and Opechancanough was set free. Smith now had 300 bushels of corn to survive the winter, but his strong-arm diplomacy severely damaged relations with the Powhatans. Thus, future trade expeditions seemed impossible. On top of that, the colonists weren't sure when another relief expedition would arrive. Smith may have saved the day for now, but at what cost for the future?
Lives, we will pick a fight when there's nowhere to run. To our Lord we will turn, running for our lives. We will pick a fight when there's nowhere to run. To our Lord we will turn. We will turn. We will turn.
Thank you for your continued support of the Virginia History Podcast. If you like what is being produced, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or your favorite podcast provider. Like us on Facebook and visit the website at vahistorypodcast.com. Please also share the program as well as rating the podcast on iTunes and offering any feedback you may have. This greatly helps in spreading the word. Please consider contributing to the podcast Patreon campaign in order to fund research and episodes. Visit the campaign at patreon.com/VAHISPod. One can also find a link under the support tab on the website. I'm also creating a podcast store where, at present, I am creating a picture library, so perhaps you are not able to support the podcast on a monthly basis, but a single purchase can be done. Links will be in the show notes page. Thank you to those who have provided me with valuable comments. I greatly appreciate any feedback I get. Please keep the comments coming and join me next time as we continue looking into John Smith's leadership and how Jamestown was affected by it.
Oh, Baba, do-do-do-do-do-do. Ba-do-do-ba-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do